So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Jamie Gabert. I'm the administrator for the Village of Weston. We will have a series of other speakers tonight, and I'll have them introduce themselves. Some of them you've already met just from milling around in the room here before we get started. But just appreciate you being here to learn more about the referendum. This is on the April 7th ballot, so upcoming here in 3-ish weeks. And we just appreciate you taking some time to learn more about what the referendum means and why now for the village. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Finke.
Hi, thanks for everybody for coming. I'm Chief Josh Finke from the fire department. I'll let these folks introduce themselves quick before I get started here.
Eric Lang, I'm a deputy fire chief.
Callie Gordon-Hazley, I'm the EMS division chief.
And we'll have Jessica.
Jessica Trotman, the finance director for the village.
So Jessica and I'll go back and forth a little bit here. And some of these things might be overlap of what we talked about kind of offline before here. So I apologize if it's a little bit repetitive for a couple folks, but we'll try to move through it as quickly as we can to get our point across. But so our agenda, kind of how did we get to where we are? Population trends, so what's kind of happening in our community, our current department staffing, our fire response and how those responses currently work and how they would work. The tax impact, which I know everybody is interested in, and then questions and answers at the end. So just a little background on the district. We started in 2014. The merger between Weston Fire Department and Rib Mountain Fire Department at the time. Both departments had full-time people and part-time people at that point, and we kind of put those departments together to form one district. We operate out of 2 stations, the same stations that we had before, and both stations are staffed 24/7, 365 currently. We've had a significant decrease in our part-time staff. I know we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. So over the last, it's really changed a lot in the last decade. We used to have a pretty good flow of part-time people that would come in. Some stayed around for quite a while. Some would come in, get a couple years of experience, go on to a full-time career. Some people didn't want a full-time career in fire and EMS, but they enjoyed it and they had a really good paying job or something like that. So they were going to stay at their current job. And those people we hung on to for quite a while usually. But the pool of part-time people has really dried up. And it's not just here, it's across the country. If anybody wants to do a little bit of research on their own of part-time and volunteer firefighters, it's a nationwide issue. There have been several fire departments and ambulance services just in the state of Wisconsin in the last 5 years that have just closed. They have no volunteers anymore. They closed, they contracted with areas around them. So now they have longer response times and things like that. So until 2021, our firefighters only were paid minimum wage, excuse me, from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. We did bump up that pay to try to continue to bring our part-time people in. But as our call volume grew and grew overnight, then people said, I can't come in and work all night long and then go work my full-time job the next day. So as time went on, we brought in more full-time people, a little at a time to make our hit to the taxes pretty minimal. And the other thing we did over time is we brought in more call volume. And as more call volume comes in, more revenue comes in, it helped offset those costs. So one of the things we've heard a fair amount of why, how did we get to this point? Why didn't we do anything sooner? We've been trying things over the past several years. We'll try some things, it doesn't work. We try the next thing, kind of that trial and error thing. So we tried to recruit some paid on call firefighters. That has happened over the last 12 to 18 months. And I know we spoke about this a little bit, but we had several applicants, some pretty good applicants, and those were people that were just going to do fire. So if a fire call came in, they were going to come from home and at least back up our full-time guys. We invested a fair amount of money into that and a whole lot of time. And at the end of the day, we have one. And that's the only person that ended up staying out of that group. They left for several reasons. One guy moved. We had a couple fail either psychological or physical testing because they have to go through the same testing our full-time firefighters do. So that plan just didn't work. We tried to recruit some more part-time people. We've tried other tactics to keep more part-time people. And again, some of the pay that's in the private sector right now, we just can't compete with. So that's part of the issue as well. We tried a federal grant called the SAFER grant. I know it's the same as us, but it's got no correlation. It's a federal grant. We tried to get that to help offset these costs for the first 3 years. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in obtaining that grant. It's extremely competitive. There's tons of fire departments that apply for it and a very small percentage get it. We have automatic aid and mutual aid. So the difference there is automatic aid comes immediately. They get toned out at the same time that we do. Mutual aid means we have to physically request them over the radio. Right now, if we have a fire in our district, the city of Wausau responds with a ladder truck and Riverside Fire District responds with an engine. And then we reciprocate back. We respond with an engine to Riverside's area and we respond with an ambulance into the city of Wausau when they have fires. So we've already maximized our ability to call surrounding agencies to kind of come and help. And the fact is that all of us are busy. So those assisting agencies aren't always available to come and help. We've had a fair amount of population growth, which is good. We're not growing as fast as say the Madison area, but there's certainly been growth. And a lot of the growth in Marathon County has been kind of in the Weston Rib Mountain area. So it's been in our district. They're both, in my opinion, communities that are desirable to live in this area. They have reasonable taxes, they have good amenities, they have good streets, they have reasonable public safety. So I think it's what draws people to those communities. Net new construction, which Jessica will get into more in depth here in a minute. And then inflation, we're not immune to the inflation. So we've had, increased fuel costs. If anybody has paid any attention, there is a class action lawsuit right now with multiple fire departments, not us, but multiple fire departments because of unfair practices for purchasing of fire apparatus. The cost of fire apparatus has absolutely skyrocketed in the last 5 years, I would say. Trucks that used to be $500,000 are now $1.2, $1.3 million. They've more than doubled in 5 years. And wait times, you could order a fire engine and it would usually take 9 to 12 months to build. Now it's taking 4 to 5 years to build. So that our costs have gone up significantly, and then just our daily costs as well. Our health insurance has gone up a little bit. We have that coming up here in a little bit. Medical supplies, Callie works hard to try to keep our medical supply costs as low as possible, but we spend close to $100,000 a year in medical supplies on the ambulance. We try to bill back for those when we can, but a lot of our billing is bundled, like Medicare, Medicaid, so we can't bill for those things.
You want to talk more about net new construction now?
No, there's a.
Okay.
So we've had a population increase since 2016. So about over the past 10 years, we've had a 6% population increase in the district. So not huge, but definitely more people. And during that same time, we've had a 23% staffing decrease. And that staffing decrease is mostly due to part-time people that have left that we have not been able to backfill. And where that really hits us is when we have fire calls and when we have ambulance calls. It wasn't that long ago, we had a program that was called Roll Up. So people that were at home, we would have a couple ambulances go out, meaning we were empty at the station, and those people that were home, they would live 5, 10, 15 minutes away. They would come into the fire station for a couple hours, they got paid. They would stick around and cover another ambulance call if it came in. And if nothing came in, they just went home until the crews came back in service. We still technically have that program. I can't remember the last time somebody came in for that. And part of that is because our pager goes off all day long, so they'd be driving back and forth constantly. And the other big thing is we do have a lot of people that live outside the area right now. I believe it's probably 50-50 that are within a reasonable distance of the community. We have people that drive 2-3 hours to commute to work. So we talked about rising costs a little bit. Some of our costs have gone up significantly. The big one is health insurance. So we did make an adjustment in our health insurance a few years ago. We changed plans to increase our deductibles to help try to balance those costs out a little bit, but unfortunately those costs still go up. So when I went back and looked, it's over 7% a year on average. So in the last decade, we've had an 85% increase in health insurance costs. And that's even with making that insurance with a higher deductible to try to lower the costs a little bit. Maintenance items, if anybody said their car fixed recently, maintenance on vehicles has gotten very expensive, fuel costs are up. And then insurance on vehicles and work comp insurance, all those things have increased. So a lot of those are fixed costs. There are things that we can't not provide work comp insurance. We can't not heat the fire stations. Those are all fixed costs that we have to pay.
Okay, so CPI versus net new construction. We talked about the inflation, how prices are increasing. One of the things that the
village is able to increase our taxes on is based on net new construction. So this graph here shows you how our net new construction has risen compared to the inflation. We're getting a little bit closer, but since 2022 and on, we've been really far apart. So as the costs have increased, whether it's wages, insurance, and other items, we haven't been able to increase our levy to cover those increases. The next slide is a perfect example. In the most recent tax bill, we were allowed to increase our taxes 131,392. And this is for operations. I know there's a lot of talk, there's a new police building being built. How come that's moving forward? We're not talking about that in the talks with referendum. One of the reasons is because the state of Wisconsin allows us to increase our taxes to pay debt. We are able to borrow for a building. We are not able to borrow for personnel. Personnel are ongoing. It's a cost that it's reoccurring. So every year we'd have to borrow. What we're asking is $600,000. What kind of payback would that be? Most people aren't going to buy our debt. So we usually issue notes and bonds when we issue debt to purchase assets such as buildings and vehicles and stuff. And those people that buy our notes and our bonds would not be buying it for operations. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking about a referendum now. If you look at the allowable levy increase, just last year it was $131,000. That's enough for one firefighter. And that doesn't cover the increases that we have for our police and for the employees here, including our fuel. Fuel has skyrocketed. I don't think we'll be making that budget this year, especially with the last winter. But that is one of the reasons why we're coming for a referendum. If you look at the allowable levy increase since 2019, it isn't enough to hire a firefighter. And that is what the state of Wisconsin allows us to raise funds for. So, any other?
Okay. With the money you're asking for, is that with everything increasing in inflation, is it gonna cover the cost?
It's gonna cover the cost for the firefighters that we're looking at hiring. And then obviously after the wages and benefits increase, it's something that we will have to absorb into our budget. But $600,000 is just too much to absorb. So that's why we're looking for a one-time increase, which will be ongoing, but that $600,000 we're going to be asking for isn't going to be another increasing, like it won't be 605 the following year. It's going to be a one-time $600,000 increase for us to hire these people. And then moving forward, the village will need to absorb, so whether it's increasing other revenues or cutting some expenditures to make sure that these 6 people will continue to get paid and benefits paid moving forward.
There's no way to guess what the increases are gonna be with health insurance,
No.
nothing.
That's why, oh, sorry.
Go.
That's why it's important for communities to grow, because like Jessica said earlier, the only way that taxes can come up is if you have new construction. So communities, we work with a lot of small rural townships that we contract for, and you don't hear much about them because they're small rural townships, but they're in a bad position because they have very, very, very little new construction. They have very low taxes typically to begin with. And that's why those fire departments, especially those very rural fire departments, are really in bad shape because they have no extra money coming in. So that's why these referendums are becoming more and more popular in communities all over the state. We have cost per resident pulled up right now this is for multiple different communities in the state that are similar size. And then I picked some that were really closer, that may be a little bit bigger or smaller. But as you can see, the village of Weston is on the far right-hand side there, and we're significantly less expensive than our neighbors and other communities of similar size in the state. This information is from 2023, if I remember right. This is on a municipal website that anybody can go and pull things up. You can kind of see on the side there's all kinds of information you can pull up. So this is a standalone information, not information that I put in, that anybody can certainly go out and source. But I just thought it was interesting how different the costs were.
One thing we want to also mention is we're asking for this referendum because we're hiring new people. So obviously we are the lowest, and if we would have kept able to go that, continue with where we are going, we would still be the lowest. But even with that referendum, it's going to put us nowhere near some of the similar sized communities.
So we'll talk about staffing a little bit, and I fully understand for anybody that's not fire department knowledgeable, some of this might be a little bit difficult to understand, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. So right now, again, like I said, we have two stations. Station 1 is in Rib Mountain, Station 2 is here in Weston. Station 2 has our battalion chief, so that's the individual that is on. There's a battalion chief always on unless they're on vacation, then that role is filled by the captain, like it is being today. Otherwise, the battalion chief runs the entire crew. They're in charge of both stations. If we have a fire, they're in charge. If there's a large car accident, all the bigger events they oversee. We have a captain at Station 1, so the captain operates that station. They will initially operate a scene until the battalion chief gets there, or if the battalion chief is off for any reason, then the captain fills in that position. We have engineers. The engineers operate the trucks, and some of this is because of state statute. So state statute says that people that are operating certain pieces of apparatus have to have certain training. So that's why we have an engineer at each station. They're responsible for operating that apparatus. And then we have our firefighter paramedics and firefighter EMTs that run ambulance calls. They're the ones that actually go in and put the fire out, or you see on the roof and things like that. So everybody cross staffs. Everybody is either an EMT or a paramedic, and everybody is a firefighter. So they can jump on either truck, just because of the way we operate, which is pretty common in fire departments. We have to be able to do both. And then we have POC, stands for paid on call. So that's our part-time position. And then we have an intern program that we started last June. So we have 3 interns, 1 on each shift. And those interns come here with no training whatsoever. They're teenagers basically out of high school, but they want to get into fire and EMS. So they physically live at the fire station here in Weston. They live where the police department used to be. We kind of fixed that up a little bit, and they each have a room in there. And then they're each assigned to a shift. And while they're here, they get their fire training, and they are trained up to the level of paramedic. And then the hope is that if there is positions for them, they would stay. And if there's not, obviously they're trained and they can go work wherever they want to when they're done. Those types of programs have been around for quite a while, just not in this area. This is the first one in central Wisconsin. Otherwise, there's a couple of them in the Madison area. And there's a couple of them in the Milwaukee area as well. So right now our maximum staffing is 9. So that's the most people will ever have on in a day, and our minimum is 7. It's rare that we're at 9. If there's 9 people on duty, that means nobody is injured, nobody's out on FMLA, nobody's on vacation, nobody's sick, and it's pretty uncommon for that. Usually somebody's got something going on. So our normal daily staffing right now is either 7 or 8. And then that obviously changes the types of vehicles that we can staff. So if you can flip to the next one. So when we have
9 on both stations?
That is both stations combined, correct?
Oh,
Yep. So if we have 9 people on duty, there's 5 people here in Weston, and there's 4 people in Rib Mountain. Okay. So that means if we were at staffing of 9, which like I said earlier is pretty rare, we can currently staff 3 ambulances. So we'd have 2 ambulances available to respond here in Weston, and one in Rib Mountain. And then each station also has a piece of fire apparatus staffed. If that 3rd ambulance goes out with only 9 people on duty, that leaves 1 person behind to run that piece of fire apparatus here in Weston, which is obviously pretty ineffective. And if we go down to 8, that takes us down to 4 at each station, so that we can only cover 2 ambulances. And if we drop down to 7, then Station 1 basically doesn't have any fire coverage, which is the way we operated until this year. So whenever the ambulance goes out of Station 1, then there's only 1 person left there, again, to try to run a fire apparatus. Should a fire call come in, or if another ambulance call comes in, they first respond and they provide care until a neighboring ambulance can come and transport. So the number of firefighters does make a pretty big difference of what vehicles we can staff, number 1, And then number two, which we're gonna get into here in a little bit, it's really our effectiveness at a fire scene. You know, if we show up at a fire scene, if there's an ambulance out and we only have 5 people, which we showed up on that board over there, there's not much that we can do at a fire scene with 5 people. It's pretty limited. You gotta have at least one person running the truck. There's one person in command. So now you're down to 3. And to make entry into a house fire, you have to have a minimum of 4 people, 2 people in, 2 people on the outside as a rescue team. The only time you can avoid that is if it's a life safety. So if there's somebody trapped, then state statute says we can go in and make that rescue and come back out. All right, next slide. So cost of a new firefighter, wages for a firefighter paramedic right now, our starting wage is $67,506 a year. And bear in mind, a normal employee, you know, so normal 8 to 5 job works 2,080 hours a year. Firefighters work 2,912 hours a year. So if you want to look at the hourly wage, you have to divide the 67,506 by 2912. Approximately $30,000 in benefits. That's WRS. The big one there is health insurance, and then work comp and those types of things. Training is approximately $2,000 to get somebody started, and then gear is approximately $4,500.
I think one thing we just want to point out with the slide is it's 104 for the new firefighter. And if we go back to what Jessica was talking about with what we are allowed to raise levy with net new construction, it would be, in most years, we wouldn't have been able to bring on a firefighter. In some years, not even half of a new firefighter.
And one firefighter doesn't do as much because that's only one shift and we have 3 shifts. So to add 1 person per day, we need to hire 3 because they work 48-hour shifts. So if we only hired 1 firefighter, that would mean 1 shift gets an extra person, but the other 2 shifts don't get any extra people. So if we want to add 1 person per day, we have to hire 3 people.
And we should clarify, I said firefighter, but just to note again that they are cross-trained. All the staff would be either firefighter, EMT, or firefighter paramedic.
Do the wages increase with longevity?
Yes, so we're a unionized department, so they're under a union contract. So just like the police department, wages are negotiated through the union contract. So a lot of people ask what firefighters do in downtime. So our guys are pretty busy throughout the day. So basically what happens is they come in at 8 o'clock in the morning on their first day. And their first thing they'll do is check the trucks, how long it takes to do that can vary a little bit. If it was a quiet night the night before, it might not be too bad, but if they just got done running a couple calls with very sick patients or had a fire, or had a crash or something the night before, sometimes there's a couple hours there to get things put back together and cleaned and all that type of stuff. So cleaning, station cleaning they do every day. So our fire stations are fairly large just because of the vehicles they have. So we clean, the firefighters clean the stations every day. Equipment repair and inspections, we don't do any major repairs, but minor things, light bulbs and some minor wiring and things like that, the guys will fix on their own. And then the big thing is training. So our guys train every day. We have a set schedule. So day 1 from 8 a.m. until approximately noon is truck checks, station cleaning. And then they'll do some other random duties in there, like fixing trucks and things like that. Then lunch is from 12 to 1, and then from 1 to 4 every day is training. And then obviously in between all of that, you run calls, and then after 4 p.m. they'll usually eat dinner. They catch up on calls. Every call takes about an hour worth of report writing too. So the call takes approximately 1 hour to run. This is an ambulance call. Most calls take approximately an hour, give or take a little bit. And then after that, depending on how fast everybody is on the computer, a report takes 45 minutes to an hour to do. So if you want to think about every ambulance call, basically takes 2 hours of labor. And we run approximately 10 ambulance calls a day. So fires obviously can vary. Some fires scenes we're at for an hour or 2. Sometimes, I mean, it's fairly rare, but some fire scenes we're at for 12 to 24 hours. Most average house fires are approximately 4 hours. We do a bunch of fire inspections. So we do have a full-time fire marshal that does the vast majority of our inspections. Last year, we did 2,587 inspections. Again, some inspections take him 15 minutes. If he goes into a strip mall and does like Cricket Wireless next to Dunkin' Donuts, he's in and out of there in 10 or 15 minutes. But if he goes to Wassa Supply, he's there all day long. just because the buildings are vastly different, obviously. He struggles to keep up with inspections. He runs pretty hard to keep up with doing all the inspections. And then our fire marshals, they're also involved with the planning and building departments of both municipalities. So when new buildings want to come in, they work with planning and zoning to make sure that they're going to meet all the fire codes and all those types of things. So he attends all of those meetings and is pretty involved with those projects also. And then we do a lot of other things like special event standbys. We do a lot of PR events, especially in the month of October for fire prevention. But we're out all summer. We do things with, why can't I think of the place down here that we do the color run with? Gigi's Playhouse. We do a lot with them. We obviously do a lot with the schools. So we do a lot with the community as well. And then physical fitness, as time allows, both stations have a fairly small gym, treadmills, free weights, stuff like that. The crews can spend some time with physical fitness. So structure fire response. So NFPA has a very long list of standards. One of the big ones is NFPA 1710, which recommends how many firefighters should be on scene of fires for a safe and effective fire response. And so basically for a residential, they define it as low hazard, medium hazard, and high hazard. Really a low hazard is your average residential structure fire. They recommend a minimum of 15 firefighters for a low hazard incident. Our maximum staffing is 9 if there's no ambulances out. Those are really rare. It's very rare that we have a fire when we're at max staffing and no ambulances out. So best case scenario, we're getting 9 guys. We do have auto aid, like I said earlier, from Riverside and the city of Wausau. If both of them are able to respond, that puts us right at that 14 to 15. So in the perfect world today, we have a 14 to 15 person response. That typically doesn't happen though. It's pretty rare. And then you start talking about medium hazards and high hazards, you get up to 28 and 43 firefighters. The fact is we're never getting there. We're not going to have that many people. If we have a very large fire, say in the industrial park, we have what's called MABUS. It's a mutual aid system. If we call MABUS alarms and start bringing in guys from Stevens Point and those areas, then we can get to those numbers, but we're talking an hour or 2 into the incident before you're going to have that many people. We also had we get an ISO inspection approximately every 5 years. ISO is the insurance rating system, and that's how your home insurance is rated. It's kind of like golf, the lower number, the better. Our rating, unfortunately, in our rural areas worsened when we had our inspection done a couple years ago, or about 18 months ago now, because we lost what they call a water haul credit, which means how much water on wheels, they refer to it as. So how much water we can respond to a fire with immediately. And because we lost staffing over the years, we sold off one of our trucks because we couldn't staff it. So we went from 2 tenders or tankers, water tankers, down to 1. So the unfortunate part of that, when we lost our water haul credit, is now those that live outside of the municipal water system, their ISO rating jumped quite a bit. And I've been fielding about 1 call a week for the last 6 months for people that say, why did my insurance rates double? Because we've had several people that live in those areas where their rates have now doubled as they're going through renewals. Yes.
And you say the rural areas, but that also includes Callan Avenue, correct?
So it's the way that ISO defines it is if you are greater than 1,000 feet from a fire hydrant, but less than 5 miles. So yes.
Less than 5 miles from the fire station.
From the fire station, yes. Correct. But you're greater than 1,000 feet from a fire hydrant,
Which now in Weston, our fire station is Rothschild or Ramon.
No, it's
Stations.
Mesker Ave.
It's on Mesker. It hasn't moved.
So ISO still rates us based on that.
It depends on where your hydrant is located. So if you have a hydrant that is more than 1,000 feet from your house, then your insurance rates are going to go up right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
In order to fix that, we would need to add the staffing, because you can't just buy a truck and say, well, now we have the water. We still have to staff the truck. And ISO, or years ago, when they would come do an evaluation, they would give us a survey and we would fill it out by hand. And they would look at the survey and say, well, okay, this is your rating. Now everything is data-based. So they take our computer systems and we print off all of our historical data, and that's what the ISO rating is structured off of. So if we have the truck and we can't staff it, if it's not going to the fires, that won't help that rating. And the insurance rates will continue to be double what they previously were. But if we can staff that truck, then the ISO rating would come down considerably. So right now, the ISO rating is 9, I think. And everybody who's in the hydrant area is a 4. So, and that's a considerable difference in insurance.
The fact of the matter is, years ago with the ISO ratings, you could kind of cheat. Because like Eric said, you could just say, yeah, we have 2 tenders. They didn't ask you if you could staff it. It was just parked in the station, never went anywhere. Some fire departments used to buy trucks and equipment just to drive. Even big cities would do that. They would have, because to be an ISO 1 is fairly difficult and you have to have certain tools even on the truck. And there were departments that would have tools on the truck that guys didn't even know how to use, but they had to be on there to get an ISO of 1. You can't do that anymore. You have to be able to prove that you're actually functioning with everything, just because the software we use now is so much more specific than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. So they can pull that data whenever they want, and they can say you have the truck, but it hasn't left the station in 3 years. So then they're not going to give you points for that.
Does it go by how many trucks or how many gallons you can provide? Could you get a bigger truck?
Both. So it's very complicated. It goes by how much hose is on the truck, how much hose of certain size, how many ladders are on the truck, and what size those ladders are, what size the pump is. There's many factors that go into it.
But that particular water haul, it also goes by response time. So we couldn't just have like 10,000 gallons in Rib Mountain on one truck.
Yeah.
Because it would take 20 minutes to get over here. We need to have a truck in both stations that can respond immediately. So we can get there in a timely manner. And just, I mean, of a point of interest, if anybody, the chief and I are in the same boat as everybody else. Chief lives in the town of Weston. I live in the village of Rib Mountain outside of that 1,000 feet. Both of our insurance has gone up also. So we're not immune to those things either.
And then from let me back up a little bit. Okay, some statistics here. So in 2024, I'm sorry, you're good. 2024, 47 people died in structure fires in Wisconsin. The last time we did this presentation was on, I believe, a Monday or a Tuesday. And that previous weekend, there was actually 3 fire fatalities in Wisconsin, both in big towns and small. I believe it was a community surrounding Green Bay, a community just to the north of Milwaukee, and then Sparta that all had fatal fires that Saturday and Sunday. For every 1,000 fires in the US, there's 29.4 injuries. They did so there's a ton of fire research that actually gets done. There's a couple of research facilities on the eastern seaboard. And the homes that have been built recently, especially in the last 50 years, they produce 200 times more smoke and they burn 8 times faster. And I can tell you, we can see that anecdotally. When we go to homes that have been newer constructed, that were built in the 2000s versus a home that was built in 1920, they burn completely different. Their challenges are completely different. The way they were constructed, each home has a different challenge. It's not just a house fire is a house fire. And it's not just the home itself, it's what's in the house. Couches aren't made from wool and standard fabrics anymore. You kind of sit on a couch full of gasoline now. It's all oil-based materials, and when they burn fast, they burn hot, and the smoke that they put out is just thick, black, and nasty. So the fires are very different in newer homes than they used to be. And then from an EMS standpoint, cardiac arrest victims, their chance of survival decreases by 10% each minute. So if it takes us 7 or 8 minutes to get to your house versus 5 or 6 minutes, you got a fairly big swing in your chance of surviving cardiac arrest. Now, cardiac arrest survival rates are fairly low across the country. They hang right around 10 to 12%. We're a little bit better than that, but if you live in a rural area and suffer a cardiac arrest, unfortunately, your chances of survival are pretty low. In the village of Weston and Rib Mountain, if we can typically get there pretty fast, and people have a fairly good chance, but the faster, the better. We do see a pretty sharp drop off at that 5-minute mark. It seems like if it takes us more than 5 minutes to get there, that survival rate drops off pretty quick. And then I'll just quickly talk about heart attack and stroke. So, the longer somebody's having a heart attack and cardiac arrest are 2 very different things. Cardiac arrest means your heart stops. Heart attack means you have a blockage. The faster we can get to a heart attack victim, and we can provide a fairly large amount of treatment in the field, and then get them to one of the hospitals in town that can treat that, every minute there is important also. If anybody's ever gone through that and see how the cath labs work at either hospital, I used to work at Aspirus and they time themselves and do everything they can to shave off a minute here and a minute there. Time is very important for those types of incidents. So this is one of our boards that we have up over there. So the number of firefighters that we have on scene has basically dropped in half from 2019 until through 2025. Couple reasons. Number one, we've lost a ton of part-time firefighters. Like I said earlier, we had a lot of those guys that lived in town. They were part-time. They came in, and quite honestly, a lot of those guys were our older guys that retired, and we just haven't been able to replace them. Some of those guys were around for 30, 40 years, and they got into their 60s, and they, are a little past their prime as a firefighter at that point, and retired. And a lot of our people that have joined live outside of the area, number one. And with the call volume that we have now, a lot of people, and I totally understand that when they're done with work, they're done with work. They can't do it 24/7, be on call all the time. I think anybody can imagine no matter what your job is, if it was, I have to carry this thing with me and every time they call me, I have to go, that would get old after a while. So we do get some people that come in off duty. Myself, Eric, and our fire marshal come into the vast majority of our fires, and we have a couple other folks that do too. But when you live in Illinois and Green Bay and things like that, it's pretty difficult to respond in. So the other thing is cost per call. So when we look at a value thing, which we've talked about a lot. So basically all I've done here is if you look at the budget for the fire department and you divide it out by how many calls they respond to, we respond to our calls significantly cheaper than all of our neighbors and similar sized departments. Firefighter workload. So even though we're not the busiest department, WAS is obviously busier than we are, but they have many more firefighters than we do. But our guys actually go on more calls because we have so many fewer firefighters than they do. So the workload on our crews is significantly higher than basically everybody that surrounds us. Eric brushed on this a little bit earlier. Last year we called for mutual aid over 100 times. I can't get the exact number just because of the way WASA tracks their data, but we know for sure that it's well over 100 times. And that's because we're just on other calls. We have 2 ambulances, so if we have 2 ambulances out, a third ambulance call comes in, we don't have anybody to cover it. We call either WASA or Riverside, depending on where it's at. And they can usually come and backfill our calls. I got a couple other examples that we'll talk about later. We provide a mutual aid back to all of those communities combined approximately 50 times last year. So the point of that is other communities are coming to help us significantly more than we're going to help them. So delayed EMS response in 2025, we try, if you live in the village of Weston or Rib Mountain, our goal is to be there in 6 minutes or less for a true 911 emergent call. In 2025, we had well over 300 calls that took us more than 10 minutes to get to, and we had 24 calls that took us more than 15 minutes to get to. And I know 10 and 15 minutes seems like a really short amount of time, but for anybody that's had to wait for an ambulance, that's a really long time. Those 5 and 6 minute responses are way better. Not every case is time sensitive, right? If somebody has abdominal pain and they just have an upset stomach, and we do get those ambulance calls, or they may have some cases where time just isn't important, then a 15-minute response is probably fine. But for the cardiac arrest and the chest pain and the severe shortness of breath and traumas and those types of things, those times are important. So a couple notable incidents. There was one big one that really, we've been discussing this for years, but there was one big one where we had everybody was already out on calls. There was a multi-vehicle crash on Schofield Avenue, and there was a cardiac arrest out of the Rib Mountain Station in one of our contracted areas. So all of our crews were out. In fact, we already had both Wausau and Riverside in the community providing mutual aid. And while all that was going on, a house was on fire in Rib Mountain. So we had absolutely nobody to respond. It was at the evening. I was at home. Eric was at home. We both came in. I live in Weston, so it takes me a little bit to get over to Rib Mountain. He got there first, but he's by himself. There's not much he can do, and he didn't have an engine with him. So long story short, it took about 20 minutes for a piece of fire apparatus to arrive. That house was 1 mile from our fire station. And Riverside was the first to get there with an engine. And then, like I said, it was about 20 minutes before they got there. Unfortunately, that home was a total loss. The homeowner was not happy. At our next board meeting, the room was fairly full. And they were good. We explained to them what happened. They understood. But obviously it's a little bit of a shock when you live a mile from the fire station. You have to wait 20 minutes for a truck to get there. We had a fairly heavily involved fire on Highway O in the town of Stettin. We had 3 people that could initially respond there. Just last fall, we had a fire at Michael Drive here in the village. Actually, the entire crew was out on calls that morning already too, but it just happened to be at shift change. And some of the off-going firefighters hadn't left yet. So they stayed and jumped on a truck and responded. But we only had 3 people there initially. So like I said earlier, we couldn't make entry. It was a basement fire. The crew couldn't make entry until one of our automatic aid trucks got there to make sure we had enough people. So that fire had a fair amount of damage in the basement of that home as well. And we had 1 firefighter that was injured from a fall down the stairs there. And then we had another fire on the October 19th of last year. Actually, let me back up. That same time we were on that fire on Michael Drive, we had an ambulance call here in the village of Weston. And because us and Riverside and Wausau were all tied up at this fire, there was no ambulances available. We had to wait for an ambulance from Mosinee to respond. And then there was also a call last fall where all of the EMS units from us, Riverside and Wausau were out. There was a call, it was in the city of Wausau, but there was a call for a child having an allergic reaction. There was no ambulances available. They had to wait for an ambulance. I think it was from Wausau that cleared from a different call, and then they were able to respond. So it's not just us. The area in the whole is fairly busy. I think a lot of individuals don't understand how many ambulance calls there actually are. Between us, Riverside, and the city of Wausau responded to well over 12,000 ambulance calls last year. So it's every day is pretty steady. And if every day was average, it would be fine. But every day isn't average. You know, we'll have those days where we average 10 calls a day. We'll have some days where we get 5 or 6 calls. The problem is those days where we have 18 or 20 calls. Then we get into some trouble.
During the recent snowstorm, we had 20 calls in about a 30-hour period. And like the chief said, it takes about 2 hours. It's an hour for the call, an hour for the report. So there's 40 hours worth of work that we had in about a 30-hour time frame just during the blizzard. And I think Marathon County put out a post on Facebook. They had,
I think I did the math. It was like
300 and something calls for service during that period.
that was just emergency calls. They had like a total of 1,100 or something like that. It was pretty crazy, but I think this is Jessica's section.
So as we were talking before, the allowable levy increase is not enough to fund additional staff, requiring the referendum seeking more funding. This graph here shows if the $600,000 referendum would pass, how much additional monies would you need to pay on your tax bill? So this is only if the referendum passes. This is only the 600,000. This does not include any, because we don't know what our net new construction is, so we don't know the allowable levy increase. I can tell you, I don't think it's going to be as high as it was last year. Last year, we had the Amazon building, which increased our net new construction quite a bit. In 2025, we had mostly homes, new homes, but nowhere near the $17 million that the Amazon facility was. But this is what you would see as an increase on $600,000.
Is that a continuing $78 for multiple years?
No,
Just wonder.
it will change because the total assessed value of the village of Weston will be increasing. So that $600,000 in the following year will be spread among more people.
Oh, okay.
So that what you saw was based on the assessed value of the village in 2025. As we get more homes, the assessed value of the village will go up and that $78 will go down.
Very good, thank you.
Mhm. So additional staff will allow us to move forward with confidence. Adequate staffing will add additional staff and it will add 2 firefighters per shift. That will reduce the call times, reduce delayed responses, and reduce firefighter fatigue. As
Our goal is to really limit those 10 and 15-minute responses, number one. And number two, it's to get more firefighters on scene, so we're more effective at fires.
And our last slide here is just what the actual referendum question, as it will appear on the ballot, will be. The referendum question, the way that it is phrased and outlined is set forth in statute. So when you read the question, it presents what is that net new construction number, which is that 2.293%, and then what that would be in levy, what that represents in levy, that's the $8 million number. And then if the $600,000 increase was added, that's the 9.2 number. And it also you will have available at the polling location what a yes and a no vote means. And we have that on the board back there, but we just wanted to also share how what we've been talking about is represented on the ballot in that question.
So because we don't have the data for 2026, we had to use the 2.293, which was last year's net new construction. We're not allowed to guess, so they just force us to use last year's number. And that's where the 8.6 comes from. That also includes your debt service levy, which that's why it's so high, because I think debt service is just over $2 million.
So now we would open it up for questions. Go ahead.
So the 6 positions would be like 2 full day things.
2 people per day,
2 people per day.
correct.
Other questions?
Are all the positions filled currently?
Yes. Well, we do have an open captain position right now because we just had a promotion on Monday.
Okay.
But we'll be filling that.
And I know Chief has mentioned before that we do have some part-time staff that if they applied could potentially, if it was approved, fulfill these positions, which would then allow for people to join staff that had training with us. Did I phrase that? Okay.
Jamie, there's a question in the back I think we missed.
Is there a map available so you can see what insurance ratings are in rural community?
We haven't, the map that we have shows our entire ISO district. It doesn't show the 2 different ratings within the district.
If you want to catch up with us afterwards and let us know where you live, we can pretty much tell you.
Yeah, we can tell you where you're at. You just need to give us your address.
ISO has a website too, right?
Yeah, but it's not ISO, it's Veritech.
That's not confusing.
No, so it used to be ISO, and Veritech is a company that bought them out. It's a private company. They bought them out like 3 or 4 years ago. So you go to the Veritech website and you find the ISO, the Insurance Services Office ratings within their website. It's very confusing.
One more?
So will the staffing occur both at Rib Mountain and here in Weston?
Yep, so if these positions were filled, we would have, our maximum then would be 11 on duty. And if we go to 11, there would be 6, there's always more people in Weston because we have a higher call volume here. So there'd be 6 people in Weston and 5 in Rib Mountain. And then we haven't honestly set our minimums yet. I want it to be 9, but when you get to staffing of 11, you kind of need to be able to go down to 8 to allow people to have enough time off. But if it would be at 9, we would go with 6 and 5, and then if one person was off, it'd be 5 and 5, and if 2 people were off, it'd be 5 here and 4 over in Rib Mountain. So there's always more people in the village of Weston.
So with the 2 positions per day, 1 will go to Rib Mountain and 1 will go to Weston.
So is Rib Mountain also sharing in this cost?
Yep.
Yes. So before we even came forward with referendum, we did go to Rib Mountain's board, and they also had an agreement about the addition of the staff. They are in a different position where they don't need to go to referendum. They do have some levy capacity. And so we did ask that question before we proceeded, that we were both on the same page with the staffing addition, and their board also agreed to that.
So Red Mountain is not asking for any more money in their taxes?
No.
Yeah,
Well, they
yes,
are.
they are.
They are, but they don't have to ask for it in this
My,
method.
my taxes next year are just gonna go up.
Yeah,
I
they'll
don't,
just
I don't
raise-
get to vote on a referendum
No, okay.
because they have a levy room. So if the referendum passes, Red Mountain will raise their taxes to pay their portion of the budget.
And this is probably a good time if I can just jump in, so everybody understands how the funding formula works real quick. It's not super complicated, but I think sometimes there's a little bit of confusion there. So our funding formula is based on three factors. It's population, equalized value, and the number of inspectable structures. Okay, that's how it was set up. And each one of those is 33.33%. So each year when I do the budget, I go to the Department of Revenue website, put all the equalized values in, I get our population and I get our inspectable structures from Eric and Marty. And I plug those in, what I call the magic calculator, because it's a spreadsheet that I think Jessica maybe made that is way over my head. And then it spits out the percentages for each community, and that's the percentage that the communities pay of our total budget. Typically, it varies a percentage or two from year to year, because obviously the communities change, one grows a little bit more or something like that. But typically, it's usually about 66% Weston and 33% Rib Mountain. That is pretty close to how the formula usually shakes out. So Weston will pay about 66% of our budget normally.
Trustee Ermeling, did you have a question?
Well, just I get people questioning about the fact that if we allow this, that we're gonna just keep adding on. But the maximum that we are gonna be able to ask for is 600,000, correct?
Unless we went back to referendum,
Well,
but there's
right,
not an.
we had to get permission
Yes,
to
yes.
increase that dollar amount, and they seem to think that once we allow this referendum, that we can add 700,000 another year, and I said, no, we're limited to 600.
There is no inflationary method within a referendum question. It's $600,000.
I just wanted to clarify.
Mhm.
Jessica, can I ask you to explain that one slide again that had the yes, no on the bottom? The part about the numbers weren't available. Can you
Oh,
explain that one
so
more
when
time?
it says the increase in the levy for the Village of Weston for the next tax to be imposed for next fiscal year 2027 is limited to 2.293. That is not the correct number. That was last year's number, but the state said, well, you gotta use whatever's available, so it just makes us go back one. And what I was telling you is I don't think it's gonna be that high, because last year, if you go back to the net new construction, that number, you can see the assessed value, that $30 million, that included the Amazon building. Because
Okay.
Amazon was just completed last year around January. So that was the first year it was actually added as our assessed value. So I don't feel that number is gonna be that high, so I don't think it's gonna be 2.290. That's my guess. Obviously, that was a really high number, and that's probably the reason why we got that high number was Amazon, so.
But because the referendum is a spring question on the spring ballot, you use the prior year. If it was a fall referendum, we would have those numbers.
Right.
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
that's a good question. These were all good questions. Are there more questions?
There was one more in the back.
The cost per call, we're one of the lowest, or are the lowest in surrounding communities.
Yep.
Is that going to change now if we have 2 more firefighters on?
Well, sure. Yeah, our cost is gonna go up. We'll probably still either be the cheapest or the second cheapest, but it'll certainly go up because we'll have more expenditure. Yep.
Jessica said she anticipated we'd still be the cheapest.
That was on the cost per capita.
Oh, you were doing cost per call.
This, I'd have them both in there, but yeah.
Other questions? Was this helpful?
It was helpful. Are the intern positions paid positions?
Very minimally, but yes. They get
$8.50 per hour is what they're paid
When they're on shift.
when they're on shift.
yeah, when they're on duty.
Otherwise, they are, because they're staying in our building, we
Yeah, we-
don't charge them rent, right? Like that, it's part of being part of the station.
We provide room and board, we pay for all of their fire education. There's a state program that is tied very heavily to the inspections that our fire inspector does. That we can utilize to pay for all their fire training, and then we pay for 50% of their paramedic training, and that comes from a state grant. It's called the FAP program, Funding Assistance Program. And we use that and pay for 50% of their paramedic.
And then the hope is that they would.
If there'd be positions
Yeah.
open, we hope they would stay.
Yeah.
they would fill it and
All
have-
three of our interns right now are excellent. They're excellent. We could not have asked for better interns.
The program has gone, I thought it would go well, but it's honestly gone better than I expected. They've been spectacular.
And we'll continue that.
Yep.
Yes.
Hard question. Has any study gone into why there's such a high incidence of suicide among firefighters?
So there's ongoing research. So there's a program nationally, it's called the Executive Fire Officer Program. And the students in that program do PhD type research. And there is a lot of research that they're doing into suicide rates. I don't know that anybody has any definitive answers. Suicide rates are up nationally anyway. At one time, Marathon County had one of the highest suicide rates per capita nationally. There's a lot of factors, like I don't know why any individual makes that decision for themselves. There are a lot of resources. We have a lot of resources within our department. We have a peer support group. We have several people who have trained. We had an outstanding pastor. We're working on getting a new pastor right now to help with that. We debrief calls. The union has a center in Washington, D.C. that we can send people to for help if they need. But I don't know why. I mean, it's hard to say what one factor. Like 9/11, the World Trade Centers, more firefighters have died from suicide who responded to 9/11 than who actually died at the event. So more than 343 New York firefighters have taken their life that they directly attribute to 9/11 since the event happened. It's just kind of, it's hard to explain to people what we see in 24 hours. One of our interns, she's 19 years old. She saw more death in the first 24 hours that she was on duty than a normal person sees in their lifetime. She had
a very rough first shift.
And she's 19 years old. We offer her a lot of support. And she did well dealing with it, but it's just kind of through a 30-year career, you know, the chief is at 26 years and I'm at 28 years. I mean, the amount of trauma and death we've seen is staggering.
But I think the way we deal with it, especially in the last, like I said, it amazes me just in the last 5 to 10 years how many things have changed, all this kind of stuff. And like Eric alluded to, and we have two of our, Jake and Mackenzie are both in our peer support group. So when we have those types of calls, they both went to training on their own to help each other out. And we'll even go to, because not very few departments, in fact, I think we might be the only one, maybe WASA does. Very few departments do that. So those guys will actually go out to neighboring departments. If they have a bad call, I've offered them up and said, hey, if you need anybody, we can, send some people out to help. And we do have, outside support as that as well, but it's just, like Eric said, I don't think anybody has the magic bullet.
20 years ago, there wasn't support. When Josh and I, 25 years ago, when we got into the service, it was, our generation, Gen X, suck it up. Deal with it. I don't want to hear about it. I want to hear you talk about it. It's your problem, deal with it. And that's how we were brought up. And there's, with that, and there's just a lot of factors that go into why individuals make that decision for themselves.
Anything not so depressing?
Sorry.
No, it's a good question.
I do know that.
It's a good question.
Lack of sleep can mimic dementia and mental health issues. And people who work long hours and don't have enough time in between.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another, I mean, that's part of, before we started, you asked, why do people come to our department? I mean, we have structure, right? The chief talked about it, 8 o'clock in the morning, we get up, we do chores, we have duty that we do. But the chief and I have created policies and structured the department in a way that if somebody's up all night working, we allow that time for them to rest as long as we have the staffing and we're able to do it. And the chief and I will take calls. You might see me or Josh on an ambulance call. You will not see the chief of the city of Wausau or the chief of the city of Marshfield or, other chiefs, or it would be rarer that you would see them on an ambulance. Where Josh and I will take ambulance calls to try to, if we can, help with that when, if that happens and people are really busy through the night, if we're able to do it.
We are a little out of practice, so if you see
Yeah.
both of us, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
We try to take Callie with.
Yeah.
Life is much better.
Other
I'd like
questions?
to thank the firemen that are doing the strip, because I spent 40 years on the road as a plumber and pipe fitter in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. So I understand the miles that they're doing every day. I do 25,000 miles a year just back and forth to work. Congratulate these guys that make that effort to come up here to save us.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
The population jump from 19 to 20, is that solely attributed to the, what's the term I'm looking for? The 10-year.
The census?
Census, yes.
It could be that we got more accurate numbers at that time.
That's quite a jump.
Yes, and it likely is that we got more numbers, but that early 2000s was a very big growth period too for the village. A lot of homes added in that time frame. So it likely is that's just when all of those homes were occupied and accounted for.
That includes Rothschild's population also.
Rib Mountains.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Rib Mountain had problems with their census.
Go ahead.
We're talking about the allowable levy increases. And you stated a 2.29 new construction increase. You're predicting that.
I'm predicting it's gonna be lower than that.
Okay, now, with the economic downturn in people buying houses, people building houses, people going into businesses, businesses going out of business, what happens if there's a big decrease in that?
So our assessed
You're gonna have to
value,
make up for it?
our assessed value is not gonna go down. And right now, we have 3 subdivisions going in. They're not slowing down.
Is that going to be completed by 2027?
Not all 3 in totality, no. They'll be phased. In all cases, those subdivisions will be phased in, but the base would stay the same. The base would never decrease.
Your assessed value of 1.78 is not gonna go down.
You might not go up as fast, but you went, yeah. It's very uncommon that a municipality, it has happened, but that they would have negative.
I'm just looking ahead to see if growth isn't going to be that prosperous as we are expecting because of the economic downturn, loss of jobs, loss of increase of housing, interest rates, price of loan, money is gonna cost more. People aren't gonna be building. Sure, you got the subdivisions that are going in. That's gonna be costing more money to buy a house, for the construction costs, everything, but are people gonna buy it? Can they afford it? If they're losing their jobs, they're not gonna be able to. So a lot of those houses may just be sitting empty if they build them. Will they come? Maybe not right away.
I don't know how many spec homes are really going up anymore. I mean, that used to be popular back in 05 to 08, but most of the houses that are building, they do have potential buyers. I know Green Tree has quite a few. I don't know if you looked at the house sales or houses for sale. off of Ross and Green Tree. They're on Muskie. Muskie's a big one. And some of those roads out there, those are the more affordable houses. They're targeting the new homeowners. They have quite a few, I guess, for sale, but a lot in Hinter Springs, there's not a ton for sale over there.
The new affordable homes though now on the market are someplace between 385 and 415 though in the village of Weston, so that even that new home price has or entry home price has dramatically increased for us just in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I know by reassessment done on my house, so I don't know. It's more than double than what I paid for it 20 years ago.
Yes.
I think the good news in a whole is that our area, although it may not be growing as fast as other areas of the state, is that I'm not an economist, but it feels like it's fairly stable. We don't seem to get those wild swings in our area. I think our jobs are pretty stable. I mean, we have some really good long-term manufacturing companies that have been around that I think, do a really good job, and they put a lot back into the community, like Green Hack and Crystal Finishing and some of those other bigger ones. So I think that is good news for that area as a whole. So I can't predict that, but I don't think you see those wild swings here like you do in some other areas. And the other thing is that, some of those smaller communities with 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, and they have one giant employer, the window manufacturer, something like that. When they go out of business, it kind of shuts down half the town. I don't think we're at risk for that like a lot of areas are.
We could use more businesses here.
Yep.
More industry out in industrial park. We could use a lot more manufacturing or, bigger businesses that can take up some of that space. Even along Schofield Avenue, there's space out there. We need to draw in more manufacturers or businesses that can add to the tax base.
Yep.
So that's the village board's responsibility. Get them in here. I don't want it to look like Red Mountain Drive by any means, but something that we can use a little bit more tax base for.
I just also want to ask for those that are joining us online, if they had any questions, they would be welcome to come off of mute and ask those questions too.
There's another one in the back.
On the insurance rating, will the increased staffing change the insurance rating for the outlying areas?
So in those areas that are less than 5 miles or less from a fire station, if you live in a rural area that is more than 5 miles, then no, you usually are rated at a 9 or sometimes even a 10, and there's really nothing you can do about that. But if you're in one of those areas that is within 5 miles of the fire station, then yes. If the staffing, like I said earlier, ISO typically comes about every 5 years, and we had ours done 2 years ago, 2.5 maybe. If the staffing gets added, I'm going to ask ISO to come back and do a reevaluation sooner so that it'll hopefully get everybody's rates to go down.
Other questions? Okay. Again, thank you so much for being here this evening. We appreciate you coming out and taking the time. Certainly, we will be here afterwards, so if there's a question that you didn't feel comfortable asking with everyone, please feel free to pull us aside and ask it individually. So thank you.